Okay, I'll get started now. This is our final session for day 2. Yeah, this is our final session for day 2, and it's really a session that represents the core of the work of the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. Right? This is basically keeping the record of our discussions and outcomes from the cumulative and shows kind of the cumulative benefit of the separate fora and all other interactions we've had over the 12 years of this thing. So I promised this morning that yeah, this session is like a deeper dive into the document. What I'll be going through is, yes, showing you what the document contains, and also compiling. I'll also be showing like a compilation of the various comments we've had on the document, the policy framework document, since it was last issued in 2013. We are going to issue it again, or like probably in the final quarter of this year, 2016. I would say at latest January, but probably in the final quarter of this year, 2016, as issue 3. And as the SG and I mentioned this morning, it's a living document because the environment of the internet and internet governance changes with the technological developments, with these market developments and so on. So we will find, and we have found, that the priorities change, they evolve. Some things that were very important in 2005 when we started are not so important now. And the best example of that I have is when we started in 2005 and started to introduce this topic of internet governance. There were representatives from certain, in fact, it was in Guyana. And I think one of the issues they brought up with internet in Guyana was just getting on. So, you know, there were parts that had no electricity. So how do you get electricity to certain places? So I'd like to think that in the 11 or 12 years since, that is no longer, that sort of basic infrastructure is less of a challenge. And we can get into prioritizing things a little more esoteric, like net neutrality and stuff like that. All right, so it's a living document. We review it periodically. And what I'll be doing this afternoon is basically presenting the compilation of the comments that we've received so far to this group, giving you the opportunity to make additional comments, give advice, and so on that we can incorporate into the new issue. And to the extent that maybe we encounter issues that probably need a little more exploration, we can carry those forward into the next cycle of discussion and consensus building. In fact, the presentation already identifies certain issues like that. And I'll be anticipating and encouraging your comments on the proposed changes that that you will see me presenting here. Well, I had this up this morning. That's just to make the presentation complete. We do use the working group on internet governance definition. I mentioned this morning as well. It is a high-level policy advisory document. The status. I want to point out the last bullet. Amendments proposed at the 10th CIGF 2014 to date will take into account, will be taken into account in issue 3. The target is 2016. the 10th CIGF in 2014 was actually held in the Bahamas. And we had maybe a half-day session. It was probably like a full half a day, where we really delved deeply into the text of the document and so on. Since that time, I would say we haven't had as comprehensive a review, but we've gotten some additional comments in since then, as in the two subsequent editions. So this slide shows basically what the table of contents of the policy framework is. There's a short introduction which basically gives a little history of the forum, and it has, in the second section, the basis and the aims of the policy framework document. This basis and the aims of the policy framework document, I don't think has changed very much since the outset. Certainly not but well, we will see it when we get into it. I'll just give an overview for the time being. It includes the definition, a vision for Caribbean, a Caribbean information society, a mission for Caribbean internet governance, and the guiding principles. So this is a sort of a basic agreement that was forged over the first 4 or 5 years of our meetings. Then, after the basis and the aims, we get into the policy framework itself. And this is broken down into subsections, and the subsections basically are the broad strategic focus areas. For example, infrastructure, internet technical infrastructure, and so on, as we will see. It's a traditional CTU that we don't really just want to have talk shop type of events. We want results, and in order to have results, we have to say, well, in this case, if we come up with a framework and things that we want to recommend as far as policy development, we think we should also include some sort of operational structure that would carry forward the recommendations that we are proposing. So the framework includes an operational structure, it includes an implementation strategy, it includes measurement and monitoring, because you want to gauge your progress as time passes, and provisions for periodic review. This appendix about dynamic coalitions. A dynamic coalition is sort of like a group of similarly a group of people of the same mind who motivated enough to try to move forward on a particular issue. And it's a term that I think arose out of the IGF, the Global Internet Governance Forum, that we had incorporated into our whole ecosystem as far as the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum is concerned. So basically, vision, mission, guiding principles, the framework itself broken down by the priority areas, and operational support mechanisms to make it work. Operational support mechanisms to carry the process forward. And we'll go into the basic ones now. And this statement, which is the statement of vision for a Caribbean Information Society, was formulated, wordsmithed, and so on in a plenary, very much like this one. I think it was in Curacao. And the vision we had at the time, especially since we were coming out of the World Summit on the Information Society, and internet governance was seen as one pillar to develop and create the information society in the world. We came up with a vision for a Caribbean Information Society. And the wording was a knowledge-based Caribbean community with strong identity and leadership in the global information society. So we wanted to be able to see our Caribbean identity out there. We wanted to be able to make our contributions to the development of the global information society, right? We wanted our identity out there, and in terms of, and what are the things we ought to be doing to have that Caribbean identity. We don't want to be subsumed under North America or Latin America and the Caribbean or whatever. You know, we have our own unique gifts. We want to make sure that it appears out there on the internet, people can see it, you know, and the value of it can be seen. So this is like the end result of our work in this area. In the context of the global information society, we want to see the Caribbean and be able to identify it. Strong identity and leadership. And then we had the statement of mission. And here is where, in fact, this is your first opportunity to give some direct, no, I shouldn't say first opportunity. What I should say is, as I go through, please put up your hand and we'll have to get the mics to you. And I'll probably need I don't want to sit there. I'll probably need a couple of my colleagues to help me take some notes too. I'm saying, if at any point you want to make a comment, please put up your hand and we'll get a mic to you for you to make a comment. So we have a comment in the back there from Carlton.
Yes, Nigel. So we are trying to get to version 3 of this framework, right?
Correct.
So since we only have a limited time, once you do what the vision is, would you just put up what the elements are of existing framework, what we are proposing to add to it, so to gin up the conversation about that?
Yes, that is exactly what I'm doing. It's just that when I got to the next page, the elements that we're proposing to add, any elements that are being proposed to be added is in a red font. All right, so it'll be clear what proposed changes are. There's another funny looking font here. I wanted to raise a question here. Put a question to the room, right? So as you suggest, that's what I'm proposing to do. It's just that this particular page didn't have any proposed changes. And I was skipping over it, but then I said, well, no, let me not skip over it. Maybe someone will have a comment. All right? Okay, so I'll go on to the statement of mission. And I think these are the fundamental things that we need to be comfortable with, right? So I'll take a little time to go through it. So we want a strong Caribbean identity in the global information society. And from that, we say, okay, for Caribbean governments, we want to develop and maintain the appropriate regional multi-stakeholder frameworks, mechanisms, policies, and procedures to enable universal, open, equitable, blah, a lot of adjectives, equitable, affordable, flexible, and secure access by Caribbean citizens to high capacity national and regional information infrastructure linked to global information resources. So you want the access must have all these attributes, and it must be available to all our Caribbean citizens because it's universal, and it must be flexible. You know, it's not just fixed line or mobile. It must be flexible. It must be appropriate to the purpose. So this is the infrastructure part. All right, so we want to also enable ample supply and capacity for the creation, lawful use, and distribution of Caribbean content and technologies. So apart from having the infrastructure, we have to have the capability, the human capability, the skills to actually create and distribute that Caribbean content and technologies or apps or whatever it is. All right, so all of this is the text of version 2. Now that we have this new thrust, and this is the question, first question I'm going to pose to the room. Now that we have this new thrust towards developing national multi-stakeholder structures, national IGFs or other multi-stakeholder groups. Okay. Other multi-stakeholder groups that would help to drive and improve internet governance and internet development at a national level. I'm wondering, do we still need to say, although this is the mission for Caribbean internet governance, do we still need to say regional here? Or could we just say develop and maintain the appropriate multi-stakeholder frameworks, blah, blah, blah. And which would give us the scope to work both regional and national. So it's kind of fading there, but before I faded it out, I decided I'd put it to the room. Any comments? Okay. Or maybe I should say any objections to doing that? Okay, well, I guess that's. Oh, we have one. Yes. Okay.
I think testing. Yeah, the answer to your question would lie in the implication of having regional in the statement, right? So what are the different implications? Yeah. What are the different implications of having that word incorporated in the statement and taking it out? Taking it out gives a more, I would say, a generalized overview of what you're saying to develop and maintain the appropriate multi-stakeholder framework, mechanism, policies, and procedures to enable. And then you have the pointers, right? So saying regional is basically putting it into frame, right? So taking it out gives it a more, I guess, a generalized outlook. But I would say take it out. And I don't think regional is really necessary in the statement. It's just overstating it.
Right.
That's my opinion.
Okay. We have another comment there.
Well, I guess you're assuming because the heading say Caribbean Internet Governance, no? So that is what the regional is all about. But regional could have a lot of meanings. So maybe there is a definition for regional. There is the Latin American and Caribbean region. There is a American region. No? So it depends on what is the meaning that somebody's putting into it.
So you would prefer to take it out? I'm asking.
Or define it.
Oh, well, either take it out or define it. Well, no. In this case, because it's Caribbean Internet Governance, yes, regional meant Caribbean. But yeah, so regional mean, I'll give you an example of what regional means as is a distinction here between regional and national. That's what's in my mind at present. So the CTU is a regional organization. We have members. The members are the different countries of the region, and we work at that sort of regional level. We interface with our members, but we are not really mandated to do anything really at a national level. We have to work with our specific members in that case. Now, this statement here initially meant that the frameworks we're talking about were specifically the regional frameworks only. However, as was explained this morning, the new thrust we have in internet governance is also to help develop the multi-stakeholder groups at the national level. So it's beyond just working, say, at the higher regional level. It is also working with the members to develop their national level structures. So if we take it out, this gives us the flexibility to work either regionally or nationally, right? Whereas before, it specifically, the specific context was at a regional level only. So this is why it's being kind of phased out. Yes.
First thing that comes to mind is not just develop, you really need to encourage as much as develop. And the other thing is appropriate. That's an interesting term. And I assumed it was linked to a regional, because you're going to have quite a variance from local to local. And that I'm assuming you were thinking appropriate, that it raised above any local squabbles or different perspectives or variance from country to country in terms of level of participation. So I guess I'm assuming you mean by appropriate that it's a certain standard, whether people raise to that standard or above that standard. So it's not 100% clear to me what you're trying to achieve in that mission statement.
We want to develop the appropriate multi-stakeholder frameworks, blah, blah, blah. And having developed them, we want to maintain them. Appropriate is not necessarily a specific standard, because what might be appropriate for Trinidad and Tobago might not really be exactly right for Belize. All right, so it would be fit the purpose given the specific local environment. All right, when the word regional was there, the appropriate would have meant taking into account the different circumstances in each of the individual member countries. Right, so it's nothing sinister about it. It's a certain flexibility that it gives you in using that term. But I'm not really hearing objections to taking out the word regional, so I'll basically work to phase it out. What this did not have, this definition, we talked about putting the infrastructure in this first bullet and developing the capacity of the citizens to use the infrastructure in the second bullet. But it didn't have anything specifically related to digital economy, developing the digital economy. And that came up because out of the CARICOM environment, I guess, the heads of government in CARICOM had a special session on ICTs in March of 2014. And some of the outcomes of that were where they mandated that we aim to develop this Caribbean single ICT space, and also a plan or develop the Caribbean digital economy by 2025. So a plan had to come up for that as well. So part of the internet development has to be focused on developing the digital economy in the Caribbean as far as the mandate of the heads of governments are concerned. And it was noted that there wasn't really a specific reference to that in the initial definition of the mission. So it's proposed that we put in an additional bullet. We're developing the infrastructure, we're developing the capacity of the people. We also want to enable expedited development of a vibrant digital economy in the Caribbean. So we have what we would do and sort of what the outcome is proposed to be. And we're open for comments on that. And remember, silence means consent in this environment. You have a comment?
I'm waiting to see the other content that you have, right? Because
the other content,
the other slides, you know, because
okay.
you know, it's pretty much could be very open statement, but this is the current. There could be current state, and there will be a desired state. Where is the gap? You know, I mean, you could always say you want to do this, but what is the destination to what we are comparing to?
Yeah, so.
But that's
right.
what I'm saying. I'm waiting for more information.
Right, but okay, granted. And everybody is not so familiar with this, so I take the point. But it's really, in order to achieve this vision, this is what we will be doing to achieve that vision. So at the end of the day, we'll have this strong identity in the global information society, and we'll also have vibrant digital economies in the Caribbean. But we'll leave it there for now, and we're not closed when the slide goes away. These guiding principles are original. When I say original, we're there from the first edition, and to date, no, we haven't had any proposed changes, and they are, I would say, fairly standard: inclusiveness, flexible approaches, regional harmonization, equitable treatment of stakeholders, capacity building for all stakeholders, regulation that promotes competitive markets and innovation. We also have to consider disaster preparedness and management needs. Actually, now that I read this particular one of the changes in terms of wording in the document is, instead of saying disaster preparedness and management, the new accepted term in that sphere of endeavor is comprehensive disaster management. So we might, well, I'll probably consider rewording this to take that into account, because we've made similar amendments in other parts of the document, in later parts of the document. So this part here is possibly subject to change, but it doesn't really change the intent of the particular line. And we also, in terms of guiding principles, we taken into account and coordinating with international trends and best practices. All right, so we take them into account, but they might or might not be exactly relevant to the Caribbean, and we would customize them that would suit our purposes. The strategic priority areas. As was mentioned, the first edition had 5 strategic areas. It had we used to call this physical infrastructure back in 2008, 2009. But now physical infrastructure isn't good enough. We need broadband. All right, so we talk about infrastructure for broadband connectivity. Then the internet technical infrastructure, that's the IPv4, IPv6, DNSs, and all these sorts of things. IXPs, the critical internet infrastructure technical standards. All right, we have to, this is another area of priority, strategic priority. We used to have something about use and misuse, but we've broken that into 2 now. One dealing with legal frameworks and enforcement, and another dealing with internet content, including development of local content and management, basically management of information. So we had a session, for example, on data protection yesterday. Although data protection will also fall within legal frameworks. But we're talking about information management here. Yes, this is probably more, a better example of this would be for example, open data, the availability of open data sets, right? And developing local content. public awareness and capacity building is still there and was there, and the research area. I talked about net neutrality and so on, and those, oops, sorry. What did I do there? All right. There are references to that under the internet content priority area. So we'll see that when we come to it. So under the broadband infrastructure, we look at some of the, this is a summary basically of some of the recommendations under there. And the way that the policy framework is formatted, it is formatted in a tabular format that would show the priority area and then the relevant sub-area for specific policy development, and then it would identify policy, and I don't want to say prescriptions, but certainly areas, specific areas for policy development. Sometimes it would have a recommendation in there that you know, we should use standards appropriate to the ITU or something, you know, depending. And it also identifies who are the main actors, who are the main stakeholders that are meant to take action under those specific policy recommendations. When I get to the end of this particular PowerPoint, I'll just show the text document such that people could understand what it actually looks like. But what's on the PowerPoint here is really a summary of the main recommendations. And there are main recommendations for adequate, affordable, local and international, fixed and mobile broadband access, and there are policy recommendations associated with this. Quality of service, benchmarks and standards, and a proposed amendment was to add in quality of experience, because beyond quality of service, the quality of experience of users was felt to be more representative of where we want to be, right? So it's quality of service and quality of experience. Because quality of service could be only specifically related to the technical, some technical parameters that are not necessarily reflective of the experience that the user is having, right? So both of those things need to be measured: quality of service and quality of experience. Again, under physical infrastructure, appropriate and harmonized legislation, policies, and structures to facilitate infrastructure build out is the Caribbean region we're talking about. And sometimes, well, we want in multiple connections within the Caribbean as well. So to the extent that there are any regulatory obstacles in getting connectivity between country A and country B, for example, we need to appropriately harmonize regulations to get over that. And there are specific recommendations as well for broadband facilities build out. Excuse me. One would have to look at, say, what are some of the specific policy recommendations or prescriptions within the document to add more specific comments. But the key amendment proposed here is adding in quality of experience in terms of benchmarks and standards. Okay. In terms of the internet technical infrastructure, I don't think we had specific amended recommendations areas. We still have in there.
Nigel, Sorry. Sorry. I had a
go
comment
back.
on the last line.
Uh-huh.
Um,
I didn't see.
So I guess we're familiar with quality of service benchmarks and standards, but how do you plan? Are you going to develop new benchmarks and standards for this quality of experience? I mean, I get what you're trying.
No,
what
things exist.
Okay.
Things do exist in terms of measuring that. So we're not really proposing things. In fact, those comments came from people who, like, maybe some regulators who manage service providers and so on. And we probably have a couple of them in the room. I don't know if any of them want to make a comment related to that. I don't remember exactly. Go ahead.
I think her point go back to what I was saying, that gap analysis, no? I mean, each country on the Caribbean at some point had to be working towards something that is tangible. What is the definition of a quality experience? What are we comparing to? And then do report eventually on that. It might be a different conversation of what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
But I think it targets to that. Otherwise, we will be here forever, and we don't know where we're at this point. Right?
Yes, I understand. I fully
think I add. I think what I'm curious about is why a quality of service benchmark and standards is not enough. If you understand what I mean. If we're talking about the level of service that people are getting and whether or not they're happy with it,
right.
Why a quality of service benchmark is somehow lacking, or sorry, quality of experience needs to be added. If the quality of service benchmarks are standard, or they're, as you say, they exist.
I'm trying to think.
I want to add more, like, for example, specifically about affordability. $20 in Belize is not the same thing as $20 in Haiti, right?
Yes.
So at some point, affordability have to be defined in that gap analysis, perhaps as a percentage of our GDP per capita.
Yes.
An American pay $20, but the GDP per capita is 15,000 US dollars. That it will be the relation of what is affordable, but otherwise, what is affordability? It's not the same for all of us. No?
Part of the challenge is, I guess, understanding the level down to which we go. I think I need to bring up the yeah. Thanks. You can't read it. Let me just see if I could make this a little bigger. Somebody could expand that for me? The wording, I mean, I could read it from here, but I'm sure the people in the back cannot. So for example, the first recommendation I said was this.
Yes. So the quality of the service, quality of experience, totally appropriate.
Oops.
Because the quality of experience that will trigger you.
That's not
to do
better.
something. Now what they have offer you? I can offer you the moon. But how do I get to it? I can offer you something that you can't afford, like Juan Carlos was saying. So there's that. I could offer you, I could say, for example, that I have broadband. And I can give you 50 megabit.
Scroll
You can
down.
get 100 megabit every time you work, but then the price is out of your reach. So
Oops, it went too far.
even if I have it, then you can't afford it, then it says make a difference.
No, that's the second
That's
one.
why
It's higher up.
quality is important.
Yeah.
As yet not a separate measure.
Yeah, higher up. Yeah. All right, you could actually no go up one more page. If you click and drag it, I suppose, and go up slightly. Right, stop right there. With respect to the comment about affordability. All right, so what is on the PowerPoint? It's pretty much these key issues within, remember this is infrastructure for broadband connectivity, right? So what is pretty much on the PowerPoint is like the main areas. And in red font here again are proposed amendments to the text. So in terms of this adequate and affordable local broadband accessibility, right? On national basis, determine and document relevant definitions, targets, and timeframes for universal access. Common regional standards set minimum target for target reach, penetration, and speed. Lower down, it should have something related to affordability. If we just, yes. Actually, there isn't something specific here related to affordability. Let me see. Identify, well, I guess it was assumed that it would have been, it's a minimum to reach penetration and speed. Actually, it should also include affordability here because there are, as you said, standards for example, percentage of GDP, the 5% or whatever percentage that people use, right? Because this part is, right, this is local access. This second box is international access. So we can, in fact, take a comment here to mention affordability in addition to these three things mentioned here. The last one? Create a regulatory ecosystem that encourages adequate and affordable local access capacity. It is there, but right, but it's not the exact point. Yeah, it's not the exact point. I think it's better that we mention it here because we want to establish certain standards for that, right? So this, for those who might not be too familiar, gives you a sense of how it is laid out. And to avoid us having to read, what, 20, 25 pages of text like this, because it's a fairly short session. It's not one of those where we spend half a day to a day actually going through the document, working in groups and coming up with text and that sort of thing, which we've done over the past couple meetings. This is more or less trying to compile the comments that have been received. Another thing I would like to show in terms of what, and actually what is going to happen when we put out this document first is that it will go out with all the changes tracked. In addition, If I go to the side, how do I go to the side? I go here. Right. It will have the comments in it. So here this says, in the document is also recorded comments that would have come from persons. And one of them mentioned that we should have a mention of ITU standard definition of broadband and so on. So that's why this reference came in here. So we can put a comment in here that we should have had a reference to affordability standards as well, and we'll put in the reference, so that when someone is reviewing the document, they'll see which comments came in, what changes or amendments were made, and if an amendment was made, what happened to it. There were a couple, and there are a couple of cases where, more than a couple, where certain comments were made that, you know, for one reason or another, we couldn't yet take a particular action. And sometimes is a question of carrying the issue forward to the next review cycle, and that is also indicated there. So in the PowerPoint, which is I was trying to get through the general recommendations at a fairly high level and just indicating main areas where changes would have been proposed. You will have the opportunity to see the specific changes based on the comments that were received. Let me just go down to the other one about quality of experience. So this particular table is broken down from local capacity, international capacity, quality of service and quality of experience issues. I don't remember who made this specific comment, but I am saying that it came from, it probably came from a regulator who was dealing with consumer complaints and experience metrics, and quality of service and quality of experience issues. So it came from some regulator who has these, or well, access to metrics for these things. So it's not like we defining anything specific in this document. Yes.
Hi, I'm Sonja Douglas from Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm not sure if it was TAT that made that comment, but I know we have a document that deals with quality of service and the user experience. So it's not basically that you set benchmarks or standards for the user experience, but you conduct surveys or customer satisfaction surveys so that you can get from the user's perspective how they view the performance of the network, because the standards are more for the technical aspect in terms of the network. So I don't know if that helps to clarify your question.
Well, yes, it reminds me, in fact, that that's how technical standards get changed, right? Because what was good and suitable at one point in time is not necessarily good and suitable at another as technology moves on, you know. So, and I was trying to think of an example just from surfing the web. I mean, everything might be working all right, but response is slow, for example. So if you look at the technical measurements, it's probably meeting technical standards, but you know, the user not necessarily quite so happy. And the customer surveys, you would be looking for a certain percentage of positive response, right? So, and this is something that, and that percentage might be different in Trinidad and Tobago from Grenada, from St. Vincent, right? What we want to do here, though, is try and harmonize those standards as much as possible around the Caribbean. But it is, as Sonja just said, that you know is two perspectives, from the network side and from the network side, which they say the the carriers are obligated to meet as compared to from the customer or the user side, what changes might be warranted. Another comment?
Yeah, Isa Ali from Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. Actually, technical measurements are possible, and they are done by particular companies in the world, such as Samnos from the United Kingdom, a company called Epituro from Spain, and there's a company in Trinidad that said they could do it there. And what they do, they take a sample out of your entire broadband customer base. Like in Trinidad, I think our customer base is 25,000 or so, right? And our sampling, based on our margin of error, we calculated a sample of about 400 customers. And what these companies would do is put what they call a white box in between the PC and the transmission modem, and they would measure response to specific internet sites, and they do that every 15 minutes or so over a period of time. And they give reports to you as the regulator, and that's been done for Ofcom. It's been done for FCC. I believe it was done for Canada and Singapore, Brazil, right? And Trinidad, we were going to do it, but the broadband survey, right? But it's that technical survey, not a customer response survey. Right. But what happened because of the economic climate, we had to kind of put it on hold. But it is possible to be done.
Right. Yeah, go ahead.
On the one of the issues that come up is whether or not consumers can do themselves a favor by testing to see whether the quality of service that is offered by the provider is set. And several organizations have developed a kit, a testing kit. And I think it's available. I know I've looked at one. We plan to ask the IT organizations around the Caribbean to host it so that people can actually go and test their own service to see whether or not they're getting what was promised and what is contracted. Sorry? No. It's a conglomerate put it together. Search organization that put it together, but I think they were funded by several organizations.
The comments are much appreciated. I realize that I probably need to try and speed up a bit because we are at 4:10, and well, I guess we could go up till about 5. Internet technical infrastructure. As I said, there weren't new recommendation areas in here. I should make a general comment though, in terms of the text document, that even though there might not have been, say, any fundamental changes recommended in the specific not specific recommendations, in the in terms of specific recommendations or the I forget what I called it, key area, there would still be a few little, or there could still be a few little text related amendments that would tighten up the language or make it more precise in the particular line item. So those would be available in the text document. So what we would do is, based on what I'm hearing here, we can make additional text changes. We'll circulate the marked up copy such that people can review and add any comments, any further comments. But the view would be to basically finalize issue 3 this year and take unresolved points. So unresolved, especially unresolved newer points into the next cycle. So just specifically to look at what we have here, interconnection via IXPs, coordinating and sustaining national and regional approaches to cybersecurity and related threats. The other priority area after internet technical infrastructure is legal and enforcement. And there's going to be a lot of cybercrime stuff related in there. Under this internet technical infrastructure, when we see cybersecurity used, we're talking more about the technical requirements for security of the data, right? For security of the net. So when you see the term cybersecurity used, it tends to be more the preventive technical as opposed to cybercrime, which is more in the legal sphere. This also calls for us to increase Caribbean participation in the internet organizations, the regional and global, and increase our involvement in internet standards development. Actually, and internet, okay, so it says and internet standards development. This would be more in the realm of ISOC and the IETF, right? And really, one of the things that they would like to see is more Caribbean participation in the Internet Engineering Task Force. ISOC has a program where they invite people in policy making positions for, you know, the policy level personnel, not really the technical level guys who actually do the standards development in the IETF, but they bring some of those policy level persons into the IETF so that they can better understand what goes on and the value of increasing participation from their country or region. And we would certainly, what did I do? We would certainly like to see, I think I knew what I did. Right, okay. Yeah, we certainly like to see more of the Caribbean technologists involved in the work of the IETF. Sometimes it's not that deep technical, but it is something that we can make a difference with. Promote and support accelerated adoption of IPv6. Up to yesterday, we were doing that, and regional collaboration for enhanced CCTLD development and efficiency. And some of the products out of that was, you know, the genesis of the Carib TLD, where we is a group of the Caribbean CCTLD operators. So there's nothing really new here. There probably just have been a couple language type amendments in the text. Legal frameworks and enforcement. There is something new proposed to be added here, at least yes, from the comments that we had received. Nothing too much substantive in terms of the key areas themselves, but most of the recommended changes were in the area of who are the people required to take action, whether it's governments, whether it's private sector or whatever. What changed here, the proposed amendments are the persons who needed to take action was expanded to include the judiciary and civil society and others in different areas. And again, when we look at the specific text document, we'll see what is being proposed. In terms of the internet content side, again, there weren't necessarily new areas proposed. What happened here was the language was enhanced in various areas, and an open data reference was added. So there was no mention prior to developing open data sets as a means of pushing the development of local content and innovation, as a matter of fact. So there was a reference added to include open data in the text. Electronics rights management institutions and practice, digitization of national archives, public and private initiatives for online distribution of content, implementation of e-government initiatives, and so on. And certainly local internet content in the Caribbean, the government has a big part to play in building that, because a lot of government information and government services would have a great impact on the availability of local content and the creation of local content. Right. So we at the CTU continue to advocate that, and we work with our members, helping them develop e-government plans and trying to push them to basically make services available to citizens online. The recommendations are still there. In the public awareness and capacity building, again, not really new areas identified, but the main amendment related to including some work on strategic awareness of some of the adverse impacts, or not some of the adverse, but potential adverse impacts of the technology. For example, e-waste. All right. So apart from making sure that people can use the technology and encouraging them to do so, we also encouraging them to be environmentally sensitive. This is just one example. I think there was probably another example in terms of adverse impacts. I can't call it to mind right now, but you would have seen what the text would look like, and you'd have an opportunity to review it yourselves. On the research side, nothing much changed there. Ongoing measurement and reporting of Caribbean Information Society development, appropriate measurement systems and metrics for progress, and using data for informed policy development and planning, as opposed to what, say, some other country has done. You know, what is it that we might need and how do we do it? If we can have local data, that could help make that. And this is an area that has a lot of scope for this whole area of measurement and so on, and metrics for project development. And CTU is pursuing and will pursue partnerships or projects or financing from the developmental agencies or from other sponsors to say develop relevant databases, at least get it started, such that we'll have the wherewithal to keep the data current via maybe annual or other periodic updates. So that takes us through all the key areas. There were some comments that, as I mentioned, are recorded in the document, but not necessarily dealt with by a particular amendment or including language, as the case might be. And some of these are listed here. There was a comment received that we ought to be putting in provisions under internet technical development, under internet technical infrastructure. I forget what we call it. That's the second one. After the broadband infrastructure is internet technical infrastructure. That we should have some provisions or recommendations concerning new and future generic top-level domains. And as Albert mentioned, we moved from maybe 20-something to 1,000 and something new GTLDs. Those already exist. And there are, it's an ongoing discussion in ICANN as to if there are going to be future TLD rounds, as they call them, you know, where there are going to be future opportunities for people to institute new ones, and whether or not we had sufficient safeguards from the last time to carry forward. Because this area is still somewhat evolving, it's probably a little bit too current for us to put down any specific recommendations in the policy framework here, and it's proposed to carry this forward into the next cycle before we discuss it some more. See what comes out of it. So carry it forward before we actually try to I don't want to say codify, but put something down in terms of specific recommendations. There was another recommendation related to cloud security and privacy. Policies read cloud security and privacy, but we haven't fully explored that, and we can take that forward in terms of looking at future amendments. One of the issues that has arisen in recent times as well is when you put something on the internet, you know, it's kind of there forever. Is there, should there be provisions for it to be removed? Do you have a right to be forgotten? Maybe that's what I should have put it into, the right to be forgotten, maybe on the internet, or is it really there forever? And whether we should have provisions related to that. I think this is something that is still evolving as well globally. So notice taken for future consideration. Is there a role for research and education networks in our, when I say research and education networks, so we have tertiary education institutions in all these countries of the Caribbean. And CARICOM has an existing project called Caribbean Knowledge and Learning Network, which made available infrastructure for collaboration among these tertiary education institutions. But the take-up of the facility was very low, and such that it's having sustainability challenges. So is it that we can propose some role in the technological infrastructure for use by these research institutions, by these tertiary level institutions or research and education networks? I don't have the answer, and I don't think we'll settle that this year, so we can continue that discussion. And I think in the same context was another comment about managing a regional public good that wasn't too specific. So the note is taken, and we'll take it forward. This was the structure that was included in the operational structure that was included in the last issue of the policy framework. It had the CTU Secretariat basically playing a coordinating role, interfacing with other Caribbean institutions in the CARICOM context, and facilitating the development and coordinating the work of dynamic coalitions that might form that deal with any specific issues. I have a working group on, I don't know, research and education networks. You might have a working group on regional public good or whatever. And these are, well, they are dynamic coalitions. They are flexible groups that might congregate around a particular topic in order to advocate specific positions. All right, so typically what we do is, what we, meaning the CTU, does is provide a forum like this CIGF for different people to come together, different stakeholders to come together, and provide a mechanism for networking, interchange, and so on, that under which these working groups might form. We haven't had a lot of success in that, and this is part of the reason why we've proposed this new structure whereby we pushing the development of national multi-stakeholder groups. So rather than the CTU try to facilitate and support these sorts of activities at regional and national level, we are saying, you know, let CTU be a player at the regional level in this Caribbean Internet Governance Forum, but let us seek to establish at the national level the more operational level implementation groups. They will be looking at pretty much similar policy issues in their own environment and making recommendations in their own environment and feeding those into regional discussions and positions and global discussions and positions. So the revised document is going to have an amended operational structure, which will look more like this. And as I mentioned this morning, there's an Internet Governance Institute that was proposed to, or that is considered to be established. So there'll be a little more discussion on that in the issue 3. There'll be a little more discussion on that put out in the issue 3. So we'll circulate the proposed amendments first and take in any final comments, and then it'll be issued as issue 3, which would be going forward for future further refinement. Yes.
Jason Hines, Barbados Remote Hub. I was wondering, we get a copy of this, right?
Of what?
The document.
Yeah, what will happen is on the same CTU webpage, the same event webpage, all the things will be posted there. They'll be posted for download.
Okay. And secondly, in terms of establishing the national IGF structure, what is facilitating that, and what is funding it, and so on?
And that is the subject of our workshop tomorrow. All right? This is the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. We don't, the people up here don't necessarily have the answers. It's to engage with the Caribbean group. What we might do is pose certain questions, give certain information, and what we will do is use the collective resources to come up with proposals. That's what gave rise to this whole policy framework document. Yeah. Okay, I'm looking at a couple of the comments that came in. Just now, why the lack of the use of internet? Why the lack of the use of the internet in the mission for internet governance, or the lack of the use of the word internet? Well, it is the mission for internet governance within it. Well, I see it comes from Devanand Tiloksing, whom I know of in Trinidad and Tobago. We could probably, there is no special motive for not using the word internet. It, as you say, the thing for internet governance is the mission for internet governance. When maybe if one could suggest a possible amendment, it could be taken on board. And the opportunity to do that could be when we circulate the actual text. right? So there might be another comment a little higher up if we scroll up or down the chat. We saw that one already. Okay, all right, good. Thanks. All right, yeah, so that's what I would say to that. No, there isn't any special reason that we did not use the word internet. Any other comments? Right, but no, I was saying the NIGFs, the national IGFs. In fact, even this forum last year, that was in the theme. It was something like building national IGFs or something of the sort. That was actually the theme. This year, the theme is a little bit broader, right? But the subject of the workshop tomorrow is really to try to develop a toolkit for these things. So those questions you're asking there, in fact, maybe I should write them down, because the way we run those workshops is we typically pose certain questions for collective discussion. And it's usually either of two ways. We might pose multiple questions and share them up among groups, or we might pose a certain smaller number of questions, and we ask different groups to address all of them, right? And then we come back with ideas that maybe we could try to take on board, right? So the ideal thing would be if we could identify, as you say, what's a good approach for going into a country and trying to set up one of these groups? Who are the types of people we would look to attract? What sort of features do we look for within a country that would favor approach A or approach B? You know, that sort of thing. So when we say a toolkit, we're talking about general guidelines for action. It'll never be so very specific that we come up with something that a formula that we take and apply to any country of the Caribbean. But there might be some common themes or common approaches or some common groups that maybe we could try to tap to create these, or to catalyze the development of these like for example, I mean, you will have people already involved in the internet, country code, top level domains. For example, each of us has a dot something something domain. These are the things that we have to try to glean from our collective wisdom in the room. And this is really what we've done over the 12 years. We've taken the collective wisdom from the room and put out proposals. All right, so that's what we've just done is what we call a plenary workshop. We get down into a certain level of detail with a topic facilitated by comments and discussion from the room. I hope you would have gained a greater understanding of the content of the policy framework document, and that you would be empowered empowered to maybe take a closer look on your own. The document is already, well, not this marked up one, but certainly the previous one, the issue 2, is available via the CTU website. We'll be putting out the marked up one. I don't want to make a promise, but probably within a couple of months. We're in August. We'll have September, either by mid-September, or it would then have to, if not, it would have to be like early October. But probably within a couple of months of today, and you would have probably at least a month to submit some feedback, such that we could collate, because the intention is to do an issue 3 in 2016. Okay. So I hope you all found that informative, if not necessarily so exciting and stimulating, but we look forward at the CTU to your continued involvement. We have one more day, and in fact, we'll be focusing very much on the Caribbean development initiatives tomorrow. We'll be hearing, we heard about IXPs today. Tomorrow we should be hearing about National Internet Governance Fora, and we'll also be hearing about some of the current topics or current live topics in internet governance globally. All right, in addition to the workshop, as I mentioned. So we look forward to your participation. Do come back and help us, because we do need it. Thank you.